you forget about that person. I adore the fact that you honor that person that much, that, you want to keep that part of it. And you have to remember, Tanya didn't just lose somebody. His whole family lost somebody. And I think that's why, I mean, in the beginning, it was a little, I didn't get introduced to Delia right away because of obvious reasons, but it took a little time. And over time, everybody else in the family was super, super supportive.
Well, what I appreciated so much about him was he always gave me the space. He never made me feel bad about talking about Sergio. From the first day that we met, he never made me feel bad. And as a matter of fact, when we had our first lunch after that motorcycle ride where we met in the gas station, all I could do at lunch was talk about Sergio and cry to this person I just met in a gas station. I mean, come on. And he was just so empathetic, and he just said, I could tell you really loved him. And I'm like, I do, and he was just being such a good friend to me and an empathetic listener. And then when we really started to come together, I still had the pictures up. And it wasn't until we got married, I still have my apartment in New York.
Yeah.
And we had a condo in Miami, and I had like Sergio's picture in the corner. I had a few pictures, and I said, I'm just gonna leave these little pictures, but any pictures of us kissing and all of that, I was like, all right, I can put those away. It doesn't
even that didn't bother me.
Not that he asked me to at all, but I just felt like for me it became a little awkward, So now in our house with our daughters, we have one picture of Sergio displayed. They know him as their angel also.
Yeah.
And the fact that he gives me the space to honor Sergio every anniversary, he's done that since the beginning. And in the last couple of years, now that the girls are old enough, they all come with me to New York to do all of the 9/11 ceremonies with me. And so I brought them into that part of my world. For a while, I felt like I needed to keep that separate. Also because the girls were young, but it also just felt a little like this is my sacred space, But now, being with each other for so long, and him always being so understanding and having the girls trying to teach them what happened on 9/11, it's important for me now to bring them with me. So.
There is a lot of people that would have an issue with this, because what I'll say is that I had a lot of friends in the beginning that questioned,
Your sister.
My sister, well, myself beside my sister, but just people, daily acquaintances and friends that ask you, "Are you really want to get involved with someone in that situation?" And my answer is always like, "It's not a situation to me," and I never even gave it a second thought. I just always thought about how I feel and how we feel together. Yeah. And to me, that was the most important thing.
I appreciate that you brought that up, because a lot of people do ask that question. Yeah. For sure. Michael definitely got that question quite a lot. Because we do have some questions now, I'm going to start directing some questions to the panelists. Orla and Gary, someone's asking about long distance relationships and how challenging that is to manage, and wondering if you have any advice about
that. The first thing is, don't be afraid of it. That's probably the biggest one. Long distance can work. And we didn't realize how many long distance relationships there are in the United States that actually work. Until we started researching it last year for presentation, and kind of here we thought we were like really special, we made this work, but there's a lot of people that make long distance relationships work. And it is challenging. Like I read that question, but you know what? You can be romantic long distance. You can communicate long distance. You can do silly things. You can do fun things, romantic things. You can still do it, but you just got to think, how can I do it from 4,500 miles away in my case? So yeah, it's a challenge, but anything worth having is worth working for.
One of the things that I loved about the long distance was it gave us such an opportunity to become very close friends, because there was nothing physical getting in the way. So all our interactions were talking to each other. So sometimes we'd spend at night and just getting to know each other and talking and laughing and sharing things. So it really made our friendship grow very deeply before we even kind of got together in a physical sense. And another thing that we used to do, we utilized WhatsApp quite a lot. And the great thing about WhatsApp is, you know, going between any countries, it's free. So, you know, we do really romantic things, like Gary might be out on his ranch and he'd be looking at the stars with a stargazing app that he had, and I'd be watching him. He'd teaching me all about the stars on his phone, you know, and show me all the pictures. And like we did very creative things. I think it actually helped very creative as a couple, because we had to kind of think about things we could do that involved kind of fun without actually physically being together. So it was a really good time. Really loved it. I actually miss it now that we're married. We used to joke. We used to say, when you actually move over here, I'm going to send you away down at the end of the garden with your phone, and let's have one of those phone calls.
I love that. All right, so we have a question about your first big fight. I'm going to give this one to Nancy and Greg.
Oh my God.
Hold on, I want to read the question specifically.
You think we fight?
Well, I mean, we're not talking about the keynote this morning. It says, where'd it go? I just saw it. Hold on one second. How did your first big fight go? Did it make you more afraid of a relationship, or did it bring up any of your widowed issues?
Let's see. Greg goes over to me. Great.
She starts all our fights, so.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, how many times we were engaged for 11 years before we got married, and I think absolutely for some of those reasons, it's yes. So it was hard for me. It'll be interesting to hear what Greg says, because I mean, Greg was trying to pretend like he was kidding, but probably I do start all the fights, and then I want to talk through things, but we've figured that out. Obviously, we've been together since 2003. But of course, it was scary, and yes, did I compare a little to what it was like when I was married to Joel? Yes, because they're really different people, and I just had to. I think I always say it's so much better being with Greg than not being with Greg. And so any kind of issues we had, I would want to work through and talk through, and all the things that I've learned about how to make your relationship strong.
Yeah, so, Gary talks about how things, that when things slow down, you tend to have more time for each other and to talk to each other. And right now, especially with this pandemic, as a business owner and just dealing with employees and work and everything, I tend to have most of my day consumed. And a lot of times, unfortunately, there's times that Nancy is not my top priority, and I feel badly about that. And I don't know, I've been accused of being a control freak, which hard to believe, but anyway, so there are things that I think when Nancy's critical of me, I think I get more defensive than I need to be. And the reality of it is, a lot of times I'm sitting there thinking, geez, I'm trying to do the best I can. And I know that I'm balancing 100 balls in the air at the same time. And the biggest ball should be Nancy, but I struggle with that. And so I have to keep reminding myself of that. And I don't know if it's because I'm widowed or not, but I do know that if we are in a fight, we try to focus on the issue and not, attacking each other. And if that does happen, I just feel like a total shit afterwards, and and have to apologize or because in the end, Nancy is the most important thing in my life, and I know that, and that's how I want to be. I try to model that, even if I'm not able to do that all the time.
Thank you guys for being willing to take a hard question, even though you didn't have a choice, because I just threw it at you. I do want to just circle back, because I think some of the intent too is that does your widowhood make you want to cut and run? Because sometimes when things get hard, I'll come to you, Gary. Thank you so much for getting my attention. Because it's easy sometimes when you've been independent in the way that widowhood encourages independence, for you to be like, yeah, I don't need this. I can do this on my own. And so it took us a long time to kind of work through, and we still, to be honest, we're still working through today, my independence, because I feel like it was really hard won. And having that super independent streak requires you to let go a little if you're going to be in a relationship. You have to find ways to reconnect and be willing to share the load with someone else. I always imagined it like I carried the whole world while I was widowed, you know, kids, everything, I'm carrying it. And if I give a piece to you and then you die too, I'm going to have to get it back and I have to juggle the whole world again. So I'll just keep it. Thank you very much. I'm not sharing. But clearly that doesn't work in a relationship. And so we've had to work through that a bit. I'm going to pass that to Michael so he can tell you about how hard it is to be married to me in a second, but let me go to Gary first.
I actually wanted to dovetail off of something Greg had said and talking about fights. So guys are really thick-headed. We really are. We're not the best at figuring out things, dealing with women, and I think that's universal. And for me, I've made a conscious effort to, I want to do my chapter 2 differently than chapter 1. I love chapter 1, but looking back at it, I made a lot of mistakes, and I did things that I wished I wouldn't have done, and things that I could have done better. So when we get into a fight, and occasionally it's just a misunderstanding, I kind of take and I say, wait a minute, just like Greg said, she is the most important thing to me. So I don't have to be right anymore. It's all right not to be right. I don't have to win a fight. I would rather discuss the issue, work through it, and keep going. But I actually contribute that to my widowhood because I want to do things differently this time in chapter 2.
Thank you for that, Gary. We've got a bunch of stuff going on in chat, and I want to just recognize that it's 10:39. So we are supposed to end at 10:45, but lucky for us, we don't butt up against anything. So we are going to go a little bit longer. But remember that if you need to pop off, if you have scheduled yourself to 10:45, you can feel free to leave the meeting and we'll continue with whoever we have. I also want to circle back and just recognize that because we had such a short time to get this event together, we don't have any same-sex couples represented here. That's only because we just did not have time to gather as many people as we could. And so if you are one of our same-sex relationships from the LGBTQ community, I want you to know that because you don't see a same-sex couple here, I hope that some of the lessons that we're learning throughout can still apply to you, and that you're just taking them and adapting. But I apologize for not having that representation because generally we would, but it has been one heck of a week and we just didn't get enough people in at the last minute. So I appreciate your understanding. Okay, so I'm going to go to Michael because he hasn't had anything to say yet.
A couple of things. When it comes to long distance relationships, I'll go back to that one. Try and find someone that's not 18 hours away. Gary with his 4,500 miles, man, 9,000, top of that one. When I used to talk to Michelle back in Australia, it was actually tomorrow. Like they're a day ahead of us, they're across the date line. So she'd never give me the winning lottery numbers, but it was always a challenge. We used to do things that you had to have you had the minimum amount of time on the call or the Skype in order for it to be a date. Just for me, a lot of the conversation I have with widowed people, and I encourage you to go about the next relationship when you're ready with looking for someone suitable as opposed to someone that I might want to marry, and use the technology that's available. I mean, if you live in a neighboring town, use the phone, use Skype, use these sorts of media so that you can be comfortable in your own space without having to actually get out and have someone beside you that might scrutinize directly and feel opposed with your widowhood and all those sorts of things. Use the technology to get comfortable at a distance before you're then in front of someone and sort of like, well, no, this didn't quite work out the way that I expected. Use this sort of stuff. I encourage it. I really, really do. What's it like living widowed?
I just want you to know that that's what his mom said. she was concerned, I mean, genuinely concerned for her son to say, okay, what's this going to be like for him to live with a widowed person? Because for people, you know, it can feel like such a really big experience. So what is it like?
Every day has its challenges, and I think that the context of that is that when you have a partner, when you're married, like has been said here, they're the most important thing to you. So everything that you want to do is to try and make life easier and better for them. Now, of course, when you come across someone that's been widowed, they've got a degree of independence that they don't need your help, so it seems, but I really can help, so it seems. I've learnt that quite often I really can't freaking help, and I can stuff it up gloriously if I insist on the fact that I can. So allow each other the space that requires. One of the things that I admire with widowed people, and this is a real ace that every one of you have. If you're willing to step into another relationship, you understand the loss that might bring. And unless I'm not a widowed person, so I don't understand the loss. But I admire my wife because she's willing to step back into a relationship knowing full well it might end like the last one. And that's a powerful tool to have. It really, really is.
That's a great segue for the comment that I need you all to hear, which is I've heard so many widowed people say, but I'm broken, or people think that this is, you know, that I have this baggage that's coming with me. And I want to just remind you that love is not baggage. So the love that you have for your person is 100% not baggage. And I love that both Michael and Ray have said this, which is, you know, I admire the way you love that person. And if you love that person that much, that means you have the capacity to love me that much too. So if you're in a relationship where your love feels like it's a burden to them, then that might not be the best relationship. I'm not going to say you shouldn't try, or that it might not be something, because that's not for me to say. That's only for you to say. And so I really have a strong feeling about when people say, no, you got to give up on that person. Well, I don't know if you do. Only you know if you do. But I want you to know that love is 100% never, never, never baggage. Tanya?
I just wanted to add that we also, the widowed, we also do have to face that possible reality. Well, it is a reality no matter what. One of us in this relationship is going to die first. I mean, ideally, it would be both of us at the same time. And once you surrender, I mean, and ideally would live to 150, babe, together. And then we die at the same time.
We got girls we got to take care of.
Right, but you do have to like acknowledge and really embrace that fear, because it's a reality. And then you can say, well, if that's going to happen, then I have to be 100% present for my partner. I have to make sure that I'm creating great memories with him, so that if one of us goes first, they're buoyed by that, you know? So it really is like you have to crack open your heart, because we do put up those walls in widowhood.
Yeah, that's the thing that's always in the back of your mind too, that the possibility does exist that, you know, one of you will pass away sooner or later. But even with that, you think about the risks you take. And one of the things when Tanya and I first met, we used to go riding a lot, and sometimes she would ride with me on my bike. And when we decided to get married and have kids, I said, that is never going to happen again. Just because we lost a very good friend couple in Hawaii, and we met, and they were on the bike together, and one of them passed away. But the likelihood of some of that happening is extremely low, but you think about that and you try to mitigate the risk.
Well, and I think, thank you for that. I think for widowed people in particular, right, we all have that sense of like making the choice, making the active choice. That's another reason why it's not baggage, what you've learned and lived through, because you're making an active choice to choose to love. You're actively choosing to love someone who is mortal. And so, you know, we know what we're choosing. And I want to get to Rona's question, but before I do, Rona, I want to say right before we got married, we were just literally like weeks before the wedding, I was struggling with the vows. And I was saying to him, like, I don't think I can say till death do us part. And because he's himself, he said, Sweetie, you don't have to say that. It doesn't matter to me what you say, so long as we're married at the end. And also I still wear Phil's wedding ring. So this is Phil's wedding ring. and I have it on my right hand. And so I'm getting ready to get married. And I say to him, oh my God, I might never take this ring off. And he goes, babe, I don't care what's on your right hand. It's your left hand I'm worried about. So he does, you know, so I still wear it. It's part of my life. It's part of my love for Phil. And then now it's part of my love for him too, because he was able to just make space for it. It didn't matter to him at all. Like I was ready to just say, oh God, we might have to call off the wedding because I'm not going to ever be able to take this ring off. And he was like, I think we're going to be fine.
I was on a visa that said I had to stay here and get married, so there was no cancelling at that.
But Rona, I really appreciate your courage because you said that you're struggling. It's a little emotional to see couples together. And I can only imagine how much that is hard for people who are not currently partnered and who really want to be partnered, to be sitting looking at us all together. I bet that that's a powerfully both painful and hopeful experience. So thank you for sticking with it. And to address your question, she says that she can't imagine the rest of her life alone, but that her kids who are grown can't really imagine another man in their life either. And I so totally get that. I'll pass to Gary because he's got his hand up.
You know, I never told Greg this, and I hope his head doesn't get too swollen, but at my first camp in 2014, I was at 11 months, and I went to the men's group. And Greg brought in this big container of beer, and he's like, okay, we're going to talk. Everybody have a beer. And so, you know, we started talking, and it was part through there. I don't know if he'd mentioned it or somebody told me that he was married again. And I remembered thinking, wow, seriously? How the hell did you do that? I mean, how did you manage to remarry again? And it actually gave me hope. Hey, if that guy could do it, maybe I could do it. And so that was my first re-partnered experience with a widow, thinking, maybe, just maybe.
And if I could answer the question about the kids, maybe, because I have quite a lot of kids here. Hi.
Yes, you do.
I think, you know, so when I remarried after 2 years, he very much wanted to be dad, and my kids very much rejected that because he wasn't their dad. And I think Gary's stance on being in the home is very much, hey, I'm not your dad and I honor your dad. I'm here in some capacity to help you and just support you. And, you know, I'm here if you need anything, but I know I'm not your dad. And I think that has enabled especially my older kids, to just really love him and appreciate him as a good friend, you know, like a good buddy in the house, as opposed to somebody who is coming in a threatening way to take over the role of their dad, because he doesn't try and do that at all. He's very conscious of that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Orla.
Important. Yep.
Someone asked when I moved my ring from my left to my right hand. I did that after probably about 5 months. I got to a place where looking at my wedding ring on my left hand made me super sad, because it told a story to the public but I was still coming home to my house without my husband. So everybody does that differently. There's no right way. Whatever you want to do with your rings, that is the thing you should do. The reason I chose to wear Phil's ring, and the reason I still wear it, and if you saw me on my keynote, when I'm nervous, I swirl this ring. That's like a nervous tick that I've developed over the last 14 years. But it's a comfort to me. It's a comfort to me to be reminded that I've lived through hard things and that the love that we've had is still here. So we're coming quickly to the end. I would like to just ask each one of our panelists to give us a 1 minute of advice to a person who is trying to figure out how might they get welcome love back into their life. And really, probably we're gonna have 30 seconds, because I've been told by our tech team that our call might shut down at 11. So I want to just make sure we get to this. So Tanya, I'm going to start with you. 30 seconds of advice for someone who wants to let love in their life again.
I think whoever you let into your life again has to accept you for where you are, for who you are, for what your history, your past, everything that you bring to the table. They have to accept that. If they are in any way trying to shut down your previous relationship or make you cover it up, bail, because it's not going to work. You have to have somebody that gives you the space to still honor your loved one. for the rest of your life, because you will want to do that.
Just be open and honest about who you are and where you're from and what your life has been like. And like Tanya said, if there's somebody that doesn't understand that and appreciate you for who you are, then it's not the right person. And as much as you might want to be involved with somebody or just have something in your life, think about it and just make sure they respect you and respect the life that you've had and where you're going.
One more quick point. A new relationship should bring you joy, not more grief.
Correct.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Orla?
Yeah, I'm totally with Tanya there. I mean, I really feel that the person that you're with needs to totally accept that you have a past, and it's like you need to be able to integrate that past into the relationship you have going forward. And you know, if they're not going to do that, as I learned the hard way, it doesn't work. So that's like a really important thing. And I also agree with the being happy. You know, it's really important to find that joy again and not, you know, add more grief or more stress into your already grief-stricken journey.
You know, and for me, I think the single piece of advice is this. I made the mistake of using my wife as a ruler to kind of gauge a relationship, you know, what's it like, because it was my previous wife that's what I knew, but she's not Lisa and she never will be Lisa. And it is completely different. And every relationship is going to have its own uniqueness to it. And I can't look back and gauge what I used to have to what I have in chapter 2. So it's completely unique and it is what it is. And so if it's a positive thing, if it's something that's healthy for you mentally, physically, emotionally, it is its own thing.
Really good advice. Thank you, Gary. Nancy.
I loved being married, and I loved everything about being married before I was widowed, even the tough times. And I just knew that I wanted to be in a loving relationship again. So I just kept giving myself permission to look and to learn and to investigate. And so I think that was part of it, that I wanted to be in love again. And yes, kind of back to Whitney's question, is I think it was really scary, and I think it's why it took me so long to make a formal commitment, because like you've all said, you know, we know this could happen again, but I still wanted to have that loving relationship. So I kept telling myself, this is what you want, and this is what you need to do to be in that relationship.
Awesome. Thanks, Nance.
So, and like Nancy, I think, you know, I enjoyed being in a great relationship. I enjoyed being married. And even though I went through a very traumatic experience, and that may cause some people to never want to experience that kind of trauma again, I know for me, being alone was not really what my view was going to be. So I was open to the possibility, when Nancy reached out to me, to at least explore having that human companionship, which I craved. And that's a personal choice. So for me, I just know that my life is more enriched by having Nancy in my life.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Honey?
Someone that I care about wrote a list down. I care about this person a lot, by the way. Wrote a list down on what they wanted in the next relationship. And I don't want that to sound selfish, because if you've lost the last partner that you had, it's very critical that the next one understand what you want in your life moving forward. For me, that's a valuable tool. The dating side of it, I don't want this to sound cheap, but practice. You're not going to find the first person to marry with the first date that you go on. And if you've got a list of qualities that you want in a person, be brave enough to go out and try a few different dates to find that person that answers that list that you wrote down, because that's your next relationship.
My advice to you is to welcome joy. I think that for widowed people in particular, joy is much more frightening than pain. because we get used to the pain, right? You get used to feeling sad and disappointed and discouraged. You get used to it, and it doesn't scare you as much after some time. But I'll tell you what scared me right away was joy, because it was that feeling of like my heart lifting again and thinking, wait a minute, what if this ends tomorrow? So being able to commit, and here's the thing, you're not going to do that all at once. That fear comes up over and over again for me, over and over again. And every single time it comes up, I have to make myself choose joy over fear every time. And like Greg said, his life is better for having Nancy in it. He gets to choose that every day. And every day that we choose joy over fear, we welcome joy. We get to experience joy. And so that also is my biggest takeaway for all of you. I hope you'll recognize this. Every relationship has its struggles. You're always, you're going to fight. You're going to figure things out. You're going to, have times when you think, it was, why did I do that? But ultimately, choosing joy over fear means that your life is bigger and better. And so who should you choose for your next partner? Someone who brings you joy. Someone who enhances your life in a way that you think it's worth every bit of whatever struggle to get through in order to have that person be in your life. And that's why we can't say, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, because we don't know what you want in your life. But if you can figure out what you want, and by that I mean a very general scope of it, and then be willing to explore and try to find it. And when you find it, let it in. Because lots of times it's easier to say, never mind, I'm too scared. I think I'll just be here happy in my aloneness. Instead, open your heart to joy. I thank our panelists so much. I thank you all for joining us. What an incredible conversation. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions, but we want you to know that you will be able to watch this again, and feel free to share it with your friends if you want. Thank you very much. Mary, we're ready to close up. And you